The church smelled of lilies and quiet desperation, a scent that would cling to my clothes for days. I sat in the front pew, a black dress clinging to my numb skin, my hands clutching a single wilting rose from the casket spray. Ethan was gone. The words were simple, but my mind couldn't grasp them. He was just a story now, a collection of memories I had to curate and protect. My husband, the man who taught me how to skip stones across the Willamette River and who hummed off-key Beatles songs in the shower, had died in a car crash 3 days ago. The service was a blur of sympathetic whispers and faces I vaguely recognized. Neighbors, old colleagues, distant cousins. Through it all, I felt her eyes on me. Diana, my mother-in-law. She sat beside me, a statue of performative grief, her back ramrod straight, a black lace handkerchief clutched in her perfectly manicured hand. She hadn't shed a single tear. Not at the hospital, not at the funeral home, not even now as the minister spoke of Ethan's kindness and infectious laugh. Her grief was a costume, and it didn't fit right. "He looks so peaceful," she'd murmured earlier, her voice like shattered glass. "It's a blessing he's no longer in pain." Pain? He was in a coma for 12 hours. He never woke up. Her words weren't a comfort. They were a closing statement, a final pronouncement on a life she felt had been inconveniently prolonged. I just nodded, my throat too tight to form words. The only person I could lean on was Jocelyn, Ethan's younger sister, who sat on my other side, her soft sobs the only genuine sound in our row. After the final prayer, as people began to file out, Diana placed a cold hand on my arm. Her grip was surprisingly strong. "We need to go back to the house, Rachel. There are things to discuss." I wanted to tell her no. I wanted to go to my own quiet apartment, curl up in the bed that no longer smelled like him, and disappear. But the house was our home. The one we'd bought together, the one filled with photos of our wedding, and the lopsided clay pots we'd made in a pottery class. It was the last place that felt like him. "Of course," I whispered, my voice hoarse. The drive was silent. The sky over Portland was a flat, unforgiving gray. When we pulled into the driveway, I saw it. Another car parked behind Ethan's truck. A moving van. My heart stuttered. "What's this?" I asked, turning to Diana in the passenger seat. Her expression was placid, her lips a thin, unmoving line. "It's time for a change, dear," she said, her voice devoid of any warmth. "A fresh start." She got out of the car without another word, walking toward the front door as if she owned the very ground it was built on. I followed on trembling legs, a cold dread seeping into my bones. Worse than the grief, worse than the shock. This wasn't about mourning. This was about something else entirely. This was a takeover. I pushed open the front door, and the scene that greeted me stole the air from my lungs. The living room, our living room, was in chaos. The soft gray couch we'd spent weeks picking out was draped in a plastic sheet. Our wedding photos had been taken down from the wall, leaving pale, ghostly rectangles in their place. In the corner, two men in overalls were carefully wrapping the antique grandfather clock that had been my grandmother's. Jocelyn was directing them, a clipboard in her hand, her face flushed and tear-streaked, but her eyes avoiding mine. "What are you doing?" I whispered, my voice barely audible. Diana turned from the fireplace, where she was examining a small porcelain bird Ethan had bought me in Seattle. She set it down with a dismissive click. "We're clearing things out, Rachel. It's too much for you to handle in your state." Her tone was cloying, a saccharin poison. "My state?" I repeated, my voice gaining a sliver of strength. "This is my home, our home." She gave a small condescending laugh. "Oh, sweetie, let's not be dramatic. This was Ethan's house. He paid the mortgage. His name is on the deed." I stared at her, my mind reeling. "My name is on the deed, too. We bought it together." "A formality?" She waved a dismissive hand. "We bought it together. You were his wife, and it was the proper thing to do. But Ethan is gone now. There was no will, which means his assets revert to his next of kin, his blood family." Jocelyn finally looked at me, her expression a mixture of pity and shame. "Mom, maybe we should wait." Wait for what? Diana snapped, her voice turning sharp. For her to stake a claim on what isn't hers? For her to take what my son worked his entire life for? She took a step closer, her eyes like chips of ice. Ethan always said he'd take care of me. This house, the money in his accounts, it's all that's left of him. It belongs to his family now, the real family. The words hit me like a physical blow. For 5 years, I had been his family. I had held him through bouts of pneumonia, celebrated his promotions, and painted these very walls beside him. Now, less than 4 hours after his funeral, I was being erased. You can't do this, I said, my voice shaking with a fury I hadn't known I possessed. You have no right. I have every right, she said, her voice low and venomous. And to make sure there are no misunderstandings, I've taken the liberty of having the locks changed. The locksmith should be here any minute. She gestured toward the front door, a queen dismissing a servant. You can gather your personal effects. I've had Jocelyn pack a few boxes for you. They're on the porch. My knees felt weak. I looked at the packed boxes sitting by the door, my books, my clothes, my life, condensed into neat, manageable cardboard squares. They hadn't just planned this. They'd executed it with chilling efficiency while I was at my husband's funeral. This house and all the money are mine now. Get out! My mother-in-law shrieked, her mask of civility finally falling away to reveal the raw, ugly greed beneath. I stumbled backward, out onto the porch, the door clicking shut behind me. I was homeless. The motel room smelled of bleach and despair. It was a place on the edge of town, with a flickering neon sign and curtains that didn't quite close, letting in the sad gray light of the afternoon. I sat on the edge of the lumpy mattress, the cardboard boxes of my life at my feet. My grief was a heavy, suffocating blanket, but underneath it, a different feeling was beginning to smolder. A cold, hard rage. They had thought of everything. The locks, the movers, the perfectly timed dismissal. They had stripped me of my home, my dignity, and the last vestiges of my life with Ethan, all before his body was even cold. I spent the first hour just staring at the wall, my mind a static-filled television screen. Then, slowly, I began to unpack, not to settle in, but to search for something, anything, that felt solid. I pulled out a sweater of Ethan's that Jocelyn must have packed by mistake. It still smelled like him, a faint mix of cedarwood and the coffee he always spilled on himself. I buried my face in it and finally let out a choked, ragged sob. My purse had been tossed on the bed. I emptied its contents, watching them spill across the faded floral bedspread. My wallet, a tube of lip balm, a handful of loose receipts, and my keys. The keys to the house were useless now, a cruel reminder of a door I could no longer open. But among them was another key, a small, strange, old-fashioned one. It was brass, with an ornate, filigreed head, unlike any other key on the ring. I remembered the day he gave it to me, just a month ago. We were sitting on the back porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and purple. He'd been quiet lately, distracted, a furrow in his brow that I couldn't smooth away. He'd pulled the key from his pocket and pressed it into my palm. His hand was cool, his expression serious. "What's this for?" I'd asked, laughing a little. "A secret treasure chest?" He didn't smile back. "Just hold on to it for me, Rach. Keep it safe." He'd paused, his eyes searching mine. "If Mom tries anything, if something happens to me, this is for you. Don't lose it." I had brushed it off as one of his strange, morbid moods. "Don't be silly," I'd said, kissing his cheek. "Nothing is going to happen, and your mom is... well, she's your mom." But he had shaken his head. "Just promise me." "I promise," I'd said, slipping the key onto my ring, already forgetting about it. Now, sitting in this desolate motel room, his words came rushing back, a ghostly whisper from a life that was suddenly gone. If Mom tries anything, he knew. On some level, he knew what she was capable of. He had seen the greed behind her carefully constructed facade. He had tried to warn me, to leave me something, a breadcrumb in the dark forest of his family. The key felt heavy in my hand, a solid piece of a puzzle I didn't understand. It wasn't just a key, it was a message, a final act of love from a man who had tried to protect me, even from beyond the grave. My despair began to recede, replaced by a sharp, focused determination. I didn't know what it opened, but I knew I had to find out. Diana thought she had won, that she had erased me. But she didn't know about the key. Returning to the house felt like breaking into my own life. I parked my car a block away and approached from the back, slipping through the familiar gap in the neighbor's hedge. The new locks on the front and back doors were shiny and defiant, but Ethan had always been terrible at remembering to lock the window in his small first-floor office. It was his one domestic flaw, a habit Diana had berated him for endlessly. "An open invitation for thieves, Ethan," she would say. Today, it was my invitation. The window slid open with a soft groan. I hoisted myself over the sill, landing silently on the worn Persian rug inside. The office was the one room in the house that was entirely Ethan's, and it was the one place Diana and Jocelyn hadn't touched. It was a space of organized chaos, stacks of architectural journals, blueprints rolled up in a corner, and the faint, lingering scent of his aftershave. Diana hated this room. She called it his clutter den. She wouldn't have wasted a moment of her precious reconquest in here. My heart pounded against my ribs as I looked around, the small brass key clutched in my hand. Where would he hide something? It had to be somewhere obvious to him, but invisible to her. My eyes scanned the custom-built oak bookshelf that lined one entire wall. It was his pride and joy, filled with books on structural engineering, urban planning, and biographies of famous architects. I ran my fingers along the spines, feeling the familiar texture of worn leather and glossy paper. I remembered him talking about a book by his favorite architect, Louis Kahn. He'd said, "This man understood that the soul of a building is in its hidden spaces." Hidden spaces. My eyes fell upon a thick, leather-bound volume of Kahn's work. It looked different from the others, slightly askew. I pulled it from the shelf. It was lighter than it should have been. It wasn't a book, it was a box, hollowed out to look like one. My breath caught. My fingers fumbled as I searched for a lock. There, on the side, disguised as part of the binding's decorative tooling, was a small, almost invisible keyhole. I slid the brass key in. It turned with a smooth, satisfying click. I lifted the cover of the book. It wasn't a hidden safe in the traditional sense, but a concealed compartment. Inside, nestled on a bed of dark green velvet, wasn't jewelry or cash. It was a slim manila folder and a single sealed envelope with my name, Rachel, written on the front in Ethan's familiar, hurried script. I sank into his desk chair, my legs suddenly unable to support me. My hands trembled as I reached for the envelope. This was it. This was the message he had left for me, the reason for the key, the final piece of the puzzle. Diana thought she was rewriting our story, but Ethan had already written the last chapter himself, and I was about to read it. My fingers shook as I broke the seal on the envelope. The paper inside was thick and expensive, the kind Ethan only used for important letters. His handwriting, usually a sprawling, energetic scrawl, was neat and deliberate, as if he'd written every word with immense care. "My dearest Rachel," it began, with immense care. "If you are reading this, it means I'm gone, and my mother is doing exactly what I was afraid she would. I'm so, so sorry. I hope you can forgive me for not having the courage to face her while I was alive. But please know I spent my last few years trying to make sure she could never hurt you." A lump formed in my throat. I could almost hear his voice, soft and apologetic, as I read the words. Diana is not who she appears to be. For years, she has been in financial trouble, a fact she has hidden from everyone, including me. She has gambling debts and has made a series of terrible investments. When I first found out, I tried to help her. I gave her money, bailed her out, believed her when she said it was a one-time mistake. But it was never enough. She sees people as resources, and I was her biggest one. I was too ashamed to tell you. I didn't want you to see my family as broken, to see me as weak for not being able to fix it. That was my mistake, and I regret it more than anything. I paused, my mind flashing back to all the times Diana had made comments about my frugal habits, her snide remarks about the cost of our vacations, the way she always insisted on receiving lavish gifts for her birthday. It hadn't been pride. It had been a performance to hide her desperation. I opened the manila folder that had been with the letter. Inside were bank statements, wire transfer receipts, and copies of threatening letters from creditors addressed to Diana. He had kept records of everything. He had been building a case against his own mother. At the very bottom of the folder was a crisp, legally bound document. I unfolded it. At the top, in bold letters, were the words, "Last Will and Testament of Ethan James Carter." It was dated just 2 weeks before his accident, signed and notarized, with witnesses. My eyes scanned the dense legal text until they landed on the key clause. To my beloved wife, Rachel Carter, I bequeath my entire estate, including all real property, financial accounts, and personal belongings. This will supersede any and all previous documents or assumptions of inheritance based on intestate succession. He had a will, a secret will. He had cut his mother out completely. The letter continued, "The house is yours, Rachel. It was always meant to be ours. Don't let her take it. The documents in this folder are proof of her financial instability and the money I gave her over the years. Money she will claim I never gave her. It's leverage. Use it. Show it to a lawyer. My old college friend, Marcus Thorne, is a good one. His card is in here. He knows the basics. Fight for what is ours." I sank back into the chair, the will in one hand, the letter in the other. Tears streamed down my face. But they weren't just tears of grief. They were tears of rage, of vindication, and of overwhelming love for the man who had seen the storm coming and built me a shelter. He hadn't been paranoid. He had been prescient. Diana thought she held all the cards, but my husband had just dealt me a winning hand from the grave. Armed with a righteous fury and a folder full of evidence, I didn't just call Marcus Thorne. I was in his downtown office an hour later. He was a kind, sharp-eyed man who listened intently, his expression shifting from professional sympathy to quiet outrage as I laid out the documents on his polished mahogany desk. The secret will, the bank statements, Ethan's letter. It was an open and shut case of a grieving widow being ruthlessly exploited. "She won't know what hit her," Marcus said, a grim smile touching his lips. "Diana has always believed she could bully her way through life. It's time she learned a lesson about the law." He advised me not to return to the house alone. Instead, he made a few calls. An hour later, I was following a uniformed police officer and Marcus up the driveway of my own home. Diana's car was there, along with Jocelyn's. Through the living room window, I could see them directing the movers, who were now carrying out our dining room table. They were dismantling my life piece by piece. I took a deep breath and knocked on the door I no longer had a key to. Jocelyn answered, her face paling when she saw me, Marcus, and the officer standing behind me. "Rachel, what's going on?" "We're here to speak with your mother," Marcus said, his voice calm but firm. Diana appeared behind Jocelyn, a smug, triumphant look on her face. "I believe I told you to leave, Rachel. Are you so desperate you had to call the police? They can't help you. This is a civil matter." "You're right, it is a civil matter," Marcus said, stepping forward. "And we are here to address it. I am Marcus Thorne, Ethan Carter's attorney." Diana's smirk faltered for a fraction of a second. "I don't know you. Ethan didn't have an attorney." "Oh, but he did," Marcus continued, holding up a copy of the will. "And he had this, a legally executed and notarized last will and testament signed 3 weeks ago, leaving his entire estate to his wife, Rachel Carter." He let the words hang in the air. The color drained from Diana's face. The movers paused, their hands hovering over a stack of chairs, sensing the sudden shift in the atmosphere. Jocelyn just stared, her mouth slightly agape. "That's a lie," Diana hissed, her voice trembling. "It's a forgery. He didn't have a will. I'm his mother, his next of kin." "Actually," I said, finding my voice, my tone as cold and clear as a winter morning, "he did. And he left me something else, too." I held up the folder of her financial records. "He left me proof of every dollar you took from him, Diana. The gambling debts, the loans you never paid back. He kept meticulous records. He knew you would do this. Diana looked at the folder as if it were a venomous snake. Her carefully constructed world was crumbling around her, and the foundation was giving way to the truth she had tried so desperately to bury. The queen was being dethroned in her own stolen castle. For a moment, Diana was speechless. Then, the denial came, a tidal wave of fury and theatrical disbelief. "You're a liar!" she shrieked, pointing a trembling finger at me. "You're a manipulative little gold digger. You probably forged that will after he died. You tricked him." The police officer shifted his weight, his hand resting casually near his sidearm. "Ma'am, I suggest you lower your voice." Marcus stepped in, his tone unwavering. "The will is notarized, Diana. There are 2 witnesses, both professionals with no connection to the family. It's ironclad. If you wish to contest it, you will lose, and in the process, the matter of the significant funds you received from your son over the last 5 years will become a matter of public record during probate." He didn't have to mention the word fraud, but it hung in the air between them, thick and suffocating. Diana's eyes darted wildly from me to Marcus to the officer. The movers, sensing an impending explosion, quietly set down the furniture and began backing toward their truck. It was Jocelyn who broke the spell. She had been silent, her face a mask of dawning horror, as she looked from her mother to the documents in my hand. "Mom," she whispered, her voice cracking, "is it true? Did you take money from him?" "Stay out of this, Jocelyn," Diana snapped. "This woman is trying to steal our family's legacy." "What legacy?" Jocelyn cried, tears finally spilling down her cheeks. "A legacy of lies? Ethan called me a week before the accident. He was crying. He said he was so tired, Mom. He said he couldn't keep holding you up. I didn't understand what he meant. But now—" She looked at me, her eyes filled with a profound, gut-wrenching shame. "I'm so sorry, Rachel. I just did what she told me to do. She said you wouldn't want the house, that the memories would be too painful." That was the final blow. Her own daughter, her accomplice, had unwittingly confirmed the deception. Diana seemed to shrink before my eyes. The fire in her gaze sputtered out, leaving behind a cold gray ash of defeat. Her shoulders slumped. Her manicured hands, which had been clenched into fists, fell limply to her sides. She had no more moves to make, no more lies to tell. She had built her entire identity on a foundation of control and manipulation, and in one afternoon, it had all been swept away. "I want you out of my house," I said, the words feeling both strange and powerful on my tongue. "Now." Diana didn't fight. She didn't scream or cry. She simply turned, a hollowed-out shell of the formidable woman she had pretended to be, and walked toward her car. Jocelyn hesitated, then looked at me. Can I help you unpack?" I shook my head. "Not today, Jocelyn. But maybe we can talk. Later." She nodded and followed her mother, leaving me standing in the doorway of the home that was, finally and truly, mine. In the weeks that followed, the house slowly began to feel like my own again. The silence was the first thing I noticed. It wasn't the heavy, oppressive silence of grief, but a light, peaceful quiet that settled in the corners and filled the empty spaces left behind. Jocelyn and I did talk, a long, tearful conversation over coffee where she apologized profusely, explaining how she had been under Diana's thumb her entire life, conditioned to obey without question. I believed her. I saw in her a reflection of the person I might have become if I hadn't had Ethan's fierce, quiet love as an anchor. She helped me put the photos back on the walls and rearrange the furniture. Diana, I heard, had moved into a small rented condo on the other side of the state. She never contested the will. There were no more calls, no more threats. She had simply vanished, her power extinguished the moment her deception was brought to light. One crisp autumn Saturday, I found myself in Ethan's office, the room where my world had both shattered and been pieced back together. I opened the hollowed-out book once more, running my fingers over the velvet lining. His letter was still there. I read it again, not with the frantic desperation of that first day, but with a deep, aching sense of peace. He had done it. He had protected me. On the back of the letter, in pencil, was a final note I hadn't noticed before. P.S. The garden needs you. I drew up some plans. They're in the bottom drawer. I pulled open the bottom drawer of his desk. Inside was a neatly drawn sketch of a garden, with designated plots for lavender, climbing roses, and a small stone bench under the old maple tree. It was the garden we had always dreamed of building together. That afternoon, I went to the nursery and bought a spade, a bag of soil, and a single lavender plant. I drove home, walked out to the backyard, and dug my hands into the cool, dark earth. As I planted that first small shoot, I thought about Diana and her vicious, greedy world. Her idea of wealth was money, houses, things that could be taken. But she had been wrong. The real inheritance Ethan left me wasn't the house or the money in the bank. It was this: the chance to grow something new in the space where something was lost. It was the quiet strength I found in the face of betrayal, the courage to fight for what was mine. I didn't win a fortune, I won my future. And as I patted the soil around the lavender, the late afternoon sun warm on my back, I smiled. My revenge wasn't loud or angry. It was the quiet, steady act of planting a garden. It was the peace of living a life she could never touch.